Okay, Zot Chanukah, second of Tevet, chapter 6. So, we spent a few chapters, right, since chapter 2, and the Alter Rebbe told us that the second soul is the godly soul. And then we've been learning about the Nefesh Elokit. And we also learned that by means of expressing herself in her levushim of thought, speech, and deed, she actually gets to be even more in connection with Hashem, be in greater connection with Hashem. And then we emphasized how the connection available to the neshama with Hashem, dafka in Torah study, is very, very special. Very, a great, great attachment, a great oneness. And from there, we continue, and the Alter Rebbe says, Kotzas from Shlomo HaMelech, Zeh le'umat zeh. Hashem created the world in such a way that the world is in perfect equilibrium. Right? There's balance between Kedusha, good, right? Kedusha and Klipa. Between God's presence and the concealment of His presence. And of course, because of this rule, right? Because of this principle, this fact, we have free choice. Right?
Can you translate
This versus that. This in balance to that. This in proportion to that. Lumat is like in contrast to, which is why I said versus.
Okay.
But the idea is, the other words also are helpful. Let's see how they translate. One thing opposite the other is the way that Chabad.org Lessons in Tanya is translating. Meaning that this is true in general, right? In general, in terms of creation, there's opposite poles and they're in proportion to each other, the poles, the pole on the side of positivity, the pole on the side of negativity, right? And inside ourselves, right? In our own experience, we have these equal opportunities, if you will. Right? In other words, we have in the Shema that we just learned, Nefesh Eloki, that we just studied. Now, Torah is going to tell us that this first soul that we learned about, the animal soul, the Klipa soul, is the same in terms of its opportunities and also in terms of its structure. In terms of its power, right? Its opportunity, what it can do, the force of the soul, and in terms of its structure, its layout, is also parallel. It's also similar, right? Which again, the similar nature, this parallel architecture, this parallel power, creates this power struggle, creates this situation of choice, and so. We have the godly soul. On the other hand, we have the soul which is sourced in Klipa. More specifically, as we mentioned in chapter 1, what kind of Klipa? Klipa Noga, right? Because the Klipa Noga is a unique kind of Klipa because it's bright, right? It's got brightness to it. In other words, what does it mean that it's got this brightness? Hi, Chaya, good morning. That there is a potential for realignment. The brightness tells us that it's not all bad, right? It's not, Shalom, Hananel. It's not all bad. There's this silver lining. There's this brightness. There's this possibility to realign the animal soul, to realign ourselves as possessors of an animal soul, and realign ourselves as well for the good. So the animal soul is, of course, a spiritual entity, right? It's not, you can't hold it with your hands. It's not physical. It's a soul. It's spirit. It's energy. It's power. It's potential. It's a ratzon, right? It's a movement, an inclination towards. It's a grasp, if you will, on reality, right? On ourselves. That is of klipa. That is of self-consciousness, as we'll continue to explain. What I wanted to say here is that the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us that, as he mentioned earlier as well, that So it is spiritual, it's not physical, and yet its point of interaction with each and every one of us, right, is via the blood. Right? What does it mean via the blood? That the animal soul is the source of physical vitality, right? My animal soul is what is responsible for my, I don't talk about it so much in this chapter, but it's responsible for my, right? My movement to eating and to drinking and to being alive.
A certain way, it cares for my needs.
Absolutely.
To stay alive.
Absolutely.
But to be in an extreme capacity.
Well, the question is going to be why.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm saying to order too much food in a restaurant because I'm scared I'm going to be hungry.
Exactly.
And I'm so concerned for me, but it's blown up in the capacity that's too much.
Well, the question is why. I don't even know if it's I don't even know that it's like it's out of proportion. The question is why. Why is it tending to? Why is it preoccupied with eating? Why is it preoccupied with drinking? Is it because of self-preservation? Yes. That is the animal soul's intention, right? Self-preservation. Because all that it can perceive is self. And so let's make sure that we exist. Yeah, exactly. And so one animal soul wants to eat tons, another animal soul doesn't want to eat tons. Either way, whether it's a lot or a little, the point is where the drive is coming from. When it's coming from a klipa place, then it's the animal soul left to its own devices, right?
What if it's not klipa though? What if it's just hungry?
So let's continue. Let's develop a little bit more of the, yeah. It's always why. It's always why. If we're eating because we're hungry, because we want to fill ourselves up so that we can continue to exist in and of ourselves, that is klipa, as we'll see. Okay, so yeah, self-interest, self-preservation. So the animal soul, right, it lives in the blood, meaning its point of interaction, right, is in our blood, is in our vitality. And we'll see that, we look inside in a minute, that as we said, it's parallel. In other words, the structure, the infrastructure of the animal soul resembles that of the godly soul, meaning, what does it constitute? 10 powers, right? Just like the godly soul has its 10 sfirot, its 3 moichin and 7 midot, so too the animal soul. Just like the godly soul expresses herself via the garments of thought, speech, and deed, so too the animal soul expresses herself through thought, speech, and deed. And we'll look inside now and we'll see what, right? So the question we want to answer is, when the animal soul is expressing herself via thought, speech, or deed, what is the herself that she's expressing, right? What is the voice of the animal soul? We said it's klipa, we said it's klipa noga, right? But let's give that some more words, right? What is she about? What is this soul about? And when she puts on these libushim, what does that look like? What is she thinking? What is she talking? What is she doing? Again, why am I saying she? Because it's the animal soul that's engarbed in the points of expression and manipulating the person, right? Through our thinking, through our speaking, and through our acting. So what sort of thoughts, what sort of speech, and what sort of actions reflect that the animal soul is driving the ship, right? What are her thoughts? What is her speech? What is her action? We'll look at that. And then we'll see what that is. And obviously it's a direct contrast to the Kedusha. So we'll end up with another definition of what is Kedusha. That kind of sums up everything we already said about the godly soul, but in contrast to the animal soul's expression, we'll have an even more focused point of comparison. In other words, an even more focused definition for godliness, Kedusha, versus Klipa. Okay? Tov. Question, Rifki?
They also are powered by the Sefirot?
So they're interesting, right?
Yeah, if it's the same structure.
Yeah. So the components, right? of the soul, Miller writes them sfirot, uses the word sfirot, right? I remember reading earlier that it's more like this in Atzilut, the model is the sfirot, and within us it's more bichinot, midot, but okay, I guess there's either I missed a point or there's different ways of communicating it. Meaning chokhmah bina dat, chesed gevurah tiferet netzach hod yesod malchut. The animal soul has the same points of self.
But it expresses itself differently than
The same kochot hanefesh, the same soul powers, meaning a power to be in chokhmah, but is also possessed by the animal soul. But the fodder, the content, right, the movement within the chokhmah is going to be opposite. What's being thought about? What are we open and curious about?
So it can be tricky, meaning that we have to.
Yeah, you have to understand the difference.
Which chachma am I? Which chachma
Okay.
am I?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
By looking at the
Because it's fundamentally different. Fundamentally different. And when we'll put on the board, right, the definitions.
Yeah.
What is klipa and what is kedusha? Yeah. If the animal soul had like 10 different soul powers, then it wouldn't be as interesting or provocative because it's completely different. But it's the same powers, the same architecture, same layout. There's a subtle difference. We'll learn inside. But at the face of things, it's like the same instruments, the same tools.
So they interpret it differently.
Well, but meaning what?
If there's two interpretations, the one that the good soul does, and the
An interpretation of reality.
Yes.
Ken. It's two different, how do you say, modus operandi. It's like there's two different consciousnesses.
Just like the spirit being in the animal soul it's getting vitality from klipa and sitracha, right?
Ken.
Not vitality from the spirit.
Right, from you saying sfirot meaning spirits of Atzilut.
No,
From the
it's like
sphira.
the vitality is coming from sitracha.
The animal soul is an embodiment of klipat noga.
But who's feeding it?
What feeds klipat noga?
Yeah.
Essentially Hashem. There is nothing that isn't God.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
If we break everything down, ein od milvado.
Yeah.
But it in its working reality, its consciousness is of separateness. It's one of lower level consciousness. It is what we'll talk more, right? Its read on reality is a superficial read on reality. Its sense is one of separateness and of self-preservation and self-interest. Because of its, as you said, its interpretation, if you will, of reality. It's perceiving the shell. It's perceiving reality as a shell, as we spoke earlier. The shell-like mentality, right? Klipa doesn't perceive the inner core.
I had a question about the term Klipa Noga because I think when we introduced the whole topic, we used it to describe the highest level of what the animal soul could be, like the Gentiles who are on the highest level of Klipa Noga, like a polished version of the animal soul. Maybe I misunderstood.
Okay, so like mixture of precise and imprecise understanding. So it's good. Mm-hmm. The animal soul of the Jew is Klipat Noga. It is only Klipat Noga. That is, the animal soul is from Klipat Noga.
Just explain in English Klipa Nova.
Sure. Klipat Noga is a kind of filter, if you will. Yeah. It's a filter through which Hashem sends his energy and light into this world. And Hashem sends his energy and light and ascends. What does that mean? He constricts himself, right? Through screens, again, if you will. And these are all terminologies to help us. No real screens, but these compressing mechanisms, again, built in, right? Hashem is shining his energy and light, in other words, himself, either in a more straightforward way, right? Or in a more obscured way, right? And so there's different screens, different filters that produce, again, if you will, different quality or quantitative shifts in the energy and light, in Hashem's manifestation of himself. Now, one of these screens is called Klipat Noga. Another screen is called Klipot Tmeot. The Klipat Noga screen, if you will, we'll learn about this more later in more detail, but it also affects the quality and quantity, but in such a way that there is still presence of Hashem there that is accessible. In other words, it's not a full obscuring of Hashem's energy and light. In the same way that the Klipat Tmeot is absolutely obscuring the light. So much so, absolutely, Klipot Tmeot, which is the 3 impure Klipot, which is the source of, generally speaking, the soul of a Gentile is from Klipot Tmeot. Except for, as we said, Chasidei Omot HaOlam, they have a unique kind of soul, which is not the same as the Jewish soul, but also not the same as the regular non-Jewish soul. When something is from Klipat Noga, which example of what's from Klipat Noga is the soul of the Jew, also the soul or the life source of most of the material world is also Klipat Noga. Anything that is permissible, but not in and of itself holy, right? Again, we're jumping ahead, right? But it's already up, because we're using these terms. Anything that is permissible, but not essential, not overtly holy or refined, is Klipat Noga. So that excludes things that are Klipot Tmeot, which would be something that is impermissible, like pig, is our classic example, and it excludes a Torah scroll, on the Lahavdil Alaf Havdalot, on the other side, which is overtly holy, overtly expressive of Hashem. As we'll define soon, what is the feature of holiness? Anything that has the feature of holiness is Kadosh. And if it doesn't, the question is it Klipat Noga or is it Klipot Tmeot? And it depends on the source of, not the source, the original source, but the movement of Hashem's energy and light as Hashem is manifesting it in this world. Is it coming through the Klipat Noga screen? Just help simplify. Or the Klipot Tmeot screen. When it comes to the Klipat Noga screen, it maintains brightness. What is the brightness? The essential godliness that is there is closer to the surface, meaning it's more easily accessible, which is why we can utilize most of the physical world to serve God. And we can also utilize our animal soul to serve God. That's why we have such an exciting, life, because we continuously and constantly have opportunity to recalibrate, to harness the powers of our animal soul and align them with our ultimate intention, which is that of a godly soul. In other words, the animal soul can be steered, can be aligned because of the possibility for goodness inside of it. But when it's left to its own devices, it will always naturally regress into the klipa dimension of the animal soul, which is again one in which it experiences the obscurity of God's light, not the presence of God's light. And therefore it is egocentric. It is preoccupied with that which meets the eye, which is self, existence, not God's presence. And it is not humble to God's presence, except when when the godly soul takes the reins. Again, we'll learn about the dynamic between the two souls, meaning like how the Jew experiences this dynamic. We'll learn about it. Maybe next chapter, soon. It might be next chapter, we'll see. Okay, so the animal soul of every Jew is Klipat Noga.
And cool that it's not Klipa.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, it's what makes this work possible.
Yeah. But the word
Okay.
comes from the godly soul.
On the animal soul.
On the animal soul.
Yeah. The godly soul can't do anything by itself because it is vested in the animal soul in the body. Okay. Right, so that's how the Alter Rebbe opens this next piece, right, of the Tanya, where we're starting to appreciate the dynamic, right? With this pasuk from Shlomo HaMelech, Ze le'umat ze asa Elokim. Ki כמו שנפש האלוהית כלולה מ10 ספירות קדושות, Again, the author himself uses the word sfirot, right? Umitlabeshet v'shlosha levushim kedoshim. Just like, on the one hand, the godly soul is comprised of 10 holy sfirot that are kadosh, and the neshama via her 10 sfirot, each one respectively, depending on what's awake and what's expressing itself, right? Can get dressed in the shlosha levushim kedoshim, in 3 holy garments. The garments of thoughts of Torah, right? The garments of speaking Torah. The garments of acting Torah and mitzvot, right? That's the godly soul's at work, at play, right? Being. כך הנפש דסטרא אחרא בקליפת נוגה המלובשת בדם האדם. So too, on the other side, we have this opponent, right? This other force. And it is the nefesh desitra achra. Sitra achra, we also mentioned the term the other day, means the other side in Aramaic. And we'll see in a minute why the Alter Rebbe is dafka using this term other side. So sitra achra, this term other side, goes together with the term klipat noga, right? The klipa of noga, the bright kind of klipa. Hamelubeshet bedam adam, where is the animal soul found? Again, it's not physically located there, but it's interacting with the person via the blood, via his vitality, his very being, right? Is being fueled and energized by the animal soul. It's our default state, right? It's our working reality, our animal soul. It's what we experience, again, by default, because it's in our blood. It's in our very being. And it's responsible for, as you said before, it's responsible for the fact that we feel hungry and we want to pursue eating and drinking. And haba'ot me'arba yesodot tore'im hanizkarim la'el. And I skipped a lot. Noga melubeshet b'dam ha'adam, it's in the blood. Klula me'etzer kitrin dimis'abuta. So the Alter Rebbe tells us that the 10 sfirot in the animal soul have a more specific name, and they're called crowns. 10 crowns of impurity. A crown seems like a very nice thing, a very regal, lofty thing, but in this case, it's parallels, right? So we also have holy crowns, but dafka the sfirot are called crowns of impurity. And Miller explained, I liked his explanation. He explains why they're called crowns, because a crown is somewhat detached from the head. It's not the head itself. A crown hovers above the head. It's not one with the head crown. It's above the head. So too, the crowns of impurity are basically the person, when the person when the animal soul is engaged, is awake, and expressing itself, the person is, on an essential level, on a true level, on an honest level, detached from themselves, detached from their true consciousness. Because the true identity, the true consciousness of the Jew is our godly soul. So the sfirot, the powers, right, of the animal soul are called crowns, representing this fact that it's us being, again, manipulated, but I'm saying manipulated as if this is like this external force taking over. It's not. It's me as well, right? I have 2 souls. My animal soul is very much a part of me. But really, it's me detached from my true consciousness, from my true self.
It's also like crowns, like they can rule over you.
Yeah, Yefet. Manis Freeman explained along those lines that the way the animal soul exists is that because there isn't inter-inclusivity in Klipa, every point that is governed by Klipa, that is expressing Klipa consciousness, the separateness of Klipa, is a king in and of itself. There isn't unification within Klipa, because it's about self-interest, self-preservation. And so each element has that I don't know what word to use. Yeah, separateness. And so they're each a crown. Each element is a crown. It's like a ruling force in and of itself.
Wow.
Different explanations why the Zohar uses, I believe it's the Zohar uses this term crowns, associates the term,
Just one question.
Yeah.
If you, as a person, are born with your own special mission in life and your
Can.
motivation.
Yeah.
And so just some of the motivation come from that animal side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, can. Yeah, our personalities and our uniqueness as per our opportunities and our missions, we're a package deal. We're a package deal. And the individual who is able to harness the strength and the prowess of their animal soul is going to be the most successful in serving God. It's not truly our enemy. Not truly our enemy. It's actually our best friend. But it's just it's not the way we encounter or it encounters us. You're right. Absolutely. Okay, so these 10 in the Lashon, right, of Kabbalah, the 10 crowns are paralleling the 10 sfirot, right, of the godly soul, which are 7. So in this case, the Alter Rebbe first mentions the emotive midot and then the intellectual midot, which is exactly opposite the way the Alter Rebbe taught us about the godly soul, right? Although it's the same structure, there is a different interplay between intellect and emotions and the different sides. So again, 10 crowns, which include 7 emotional negative traits, evil midot. As we saw in chapter 1, right? We have the 4 temperaments, haba'ot me'arba yesodot ra'im anizkarim la'el, which are rooted in the 4 elements, which are the building blocks of all of creation, including spirit, including the animal soul. And so we have, who remembers, we have fire. Fire, right. So fire is the arrogance, right? The anger. And earth is laziness. And air is emptiness, right? Frivolity. And water is lust, desire. Okay. Yeah, nachon, sadness, nachon, and exactly, yafa, beautiful. And they're rooted in these 4 elements, right? And the 7 midot we would have, kindness to things that don't deserve kindness. Anger, which is an expression of severity. Boastfulness, an expression of beauty, right? Okay. And we have, in addition to the 7 emotional traits, we have the 3 points of intellect, of sechel, which give birth to these 7. Shehin chokhmah, bina, vedat, mekor hamidot. Not Rebbe sums it up, if you will. It says the source of the midot, putting less emphasis on the fact that they're parenting the midot and more saying that they're the source. The relationship isn't as close in the case of the animal soul. So what's going on? The animal soul is innately is naturally predisposed towards emotions, right? Evil, right? Negative displays of emotion, manifestations of emotions, right? The lower consciousness. And also you need intellect. Why? Again, it's when I speak it out, it's obvious that why? Because you don't want something, or you're not angry about something, or you don't want something, you're not afraid of something, you're not going to boast about something if you don't have an idea in your head around values of things, right? Like the child wants ice cream because it knows that ice cream is yummy, right? So every movement, every emotion, every desire, every impulse is always rooted in an idea. And the Alter Rebbe says, as per the erech, as per the extent or development of the mind, the emotions will follow suit. So a child gets very angry when you take his toy, right? And adults might not get as angry when you take something of theirs because their intellect has developed such that maybe not, depends what it is. But your toy, the same thing when you were a child, the stuff that got you annoyed is probably not going to get you annoyed. Other stuff might get you just as annoyed, right? But not the same. It's not going to express itself in the same way because our emotions are as per our understanding of understanding. So that's the relationship between the midot and the seichel and the animal soul. We have fodder, we have concepts, and the animal soul is moved, is responding, right, and engaged. At the source of it all, because let's just do that inside. Right? The child wants and desires and is interested in things that are less substantial, right? Less valuable. Because the brain, the mind of the child is not developed enough to appreciate things that actually have greater value. And he also will get very angry around things that, when you get older, you realize it's not so meaningful, it's not so valuable, the little things that you got angry around. And the boastfulness, again, will be in association with stuff that's more trivial, that's less substantial and less valuable. Okay, so that's the relationship between the midot and the mochin. ועשר בחינות אלו הטמעות, כשאדם מחשב בהן או מדבר או עושה, הרי מחשבתו שבמוחו ודיבורו שבפיו וכוח המעשי שבידיו ושאר איבריו נקראים לבושי מסעבו. לעשר בחינות אלו הטמעות. Okay, so when a person who has an godly soul and an animal soul, but when a person, right, Jew, is moving, right, in other words, thinking or speaking or acting as per the impulses of the animal soul, they are wearing impure garments. Okay, in other words, of the 10 unclean categories, right, of these bechinot, faculties of the animal soul are expressed. Now the person is garbed in unclean garments. Right, so last chapter and the chapter before, we're talking about the person engaging their godly soul. They are in holy garments, right? They're manifesting Hashem. In Sof, here a person is stepping into impure garments. When is the person engarbed in impure garments? Toch kedei, while they are thinking, speaking, or acting with impurity from the impure animal soul, that's when they are in impure garments. Okay? In other words, we take on and take off the garments. They're not glued to us, the garments, right? We take them on and off. We can put on these garments, we can put on these garments. And when a person's animal soul is expressing itself, the Jew is dressed in impure garments.
And if you see somebody in their unclean garments, you also get affected.
If you judge them, then you're in clean garments.
Or if you just see it by accident. Fun?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the person, right? How sensitive you are, what your relationship is to them. I think what Rifki said is beautiful. Are you judging them or not?
Right.
You know?
Like if
How are you interacting with them?
Right. If the paper still jumps on you.
I don't know. I'm not sure if like a tzaddik is. I don't know. I don't know how it works. If you're not, I think it depends on the engagement with the person. And also, we've studied before that beautiful story about Netivat Shalom about the person who comes to his Rebbe. I don't remember the name of that tzaddik. Right? He's complaining that he's having machshavot zorot. He has these. I think it's like he's having these thoughts that are impure. He doesn't know what to do and doesn't know where they came from, and he's completely befuddled. And the Rebbe tells him that those are actually your neighbor's thoughts. Remember that story? Right? He says, like, those are not your thoughts. You're right. Like, they're not your thoughts. They're your neighbor's thoughts, but they've stuck onto you. I don't know that's always the case. I think it depends on our interactions and the person. I don't know.
That's why you have to have good neighbors. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, right? There's something to say. At the same time, like the Shaliach or the Rebbe, Dafka puts himself, right? And also there's this beautiful Torah around the Seder, like that the Haggadah puts the Chacham next to the Rasha. Because who else is the Rasha going to sit next to? He has to sit next to the Chacham because we have to be able to give him a point of positive influence. So, Hamit Abek Iminada, we have a pasuk that the Alter Rebbe will bring us, that a person who argues, who wrestles when you wrestle with something that's dirty, you get dirty. But if you're projecting a light, that feels very dangerous. Doesn't that feel very overwhelming? To say that a person will necessarily be negatively affected by anything that's unclean, that feels to me intense. I don't know that we're so vulnerable. So it depends, right? But it might also depend on whether you're open and exposed to receive, or you're open and exposing to share. I don't know. There's a lot. I think that when a person is in filthy clothes, they're smelly. Meaning there is, and a sensitive person will be able to, will sense that there's a situation here that needs improvements. And again, if they're shayach, they'll try and step in and help. Okay. So what are these garments? So not what are the garments, but he said that they're impure garments, and the impure garments are being worn when the animal soul is expressing itself in any of these three modes. What are the expressions? What might he be thinking? What might he be speaking? What might he be doing such that he acquires these filthy garments, these impure garments? So this is something that we're about to learn that will be familiar to anybody who studied the Tanya or Chabad Hasidut and other Hasidut. And very surprising if we're not familiar with this idea. Because it really, really, really takes the opportunity to be in connection with Hashem up a notch. Okay, so what's the point? The hein hem kol ha'ma'asim asher na'asim tachat hashemesh. These garments that are impure basically include everything and anything that are done under the sun. What does it mean, done under the sun? What does under the sun represent? It's a mashal, it's a metaphor. We have under the sun and we have over the sun. Right? Under the sun represents mundane, that which is mundane. So any thought, speech, or action that is of the under the sun category, meaning that is mundane, that is stam, that just, right, is an impure garment. It is the animal soul expressing itself. Asher hakol hevel v'reut v'ruach, which are all vanity and an affliction of the spirits. That's a quote from Shlomo Melech, from Mishlei. Kohelet. It's Kohelet, sorry. וכמו שכתוב בזוהר, בשלח שהן תבירו דרוחה וכו'. The Zohar interprets these words of Shlomo Melech to mean a ruination of the spirits. Vanity and an affliction, a ruination. Any thought, speech, or deed that is mundane, right? Neutral seeming, is of the animal soul. Let's continue. Actually, okay, yeah, let's continue, but we're going to continue to hone in on what is this, right? What is this klipa? What is this space of vanity, of impurity, of mundanity, right? So it's basically anything that isn't. אשר לא להשם המה ולרצונו ולעבודתו. After he gives us another, right, more general definition. All words and all thoughts that are not directed to God and to His will and His service are all garments for the animal soul. Shezeu perush lashon titra achra. Now, Rabbi tells us that's why we're using the term, and the Zohar uses the term sitra achra, the other side. Why? Because it's a very large category. It includes anything that isn't of the side of holiness. So we're polarizing our opportunities, right? We have for God, Mila Hashem Elai, right? The Maccabim, who is for God. Any thought, speech, or deed that is directed towards God, meaning that is of God's will, is Kadosh. And anything that is not in alignment with Hashem, meaning with focus and intention and higher consciousness to be in connection with Hashem, is not in connection with Hashem, meaning it's of the other side. So what does belong to holiness? What is for Hashem? What is the feature of Kedusha? V'tzad Kedusha eino ela hashra'a v'hamshacha mikdushato shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The side of Kedusha is an experience, right? Where? An experience that draws Hashem into it. A moment, a interaction, a thought, right? A speech or deed that is transparent to Hashem's presence, that is Kedusha. Where Hashem can be drawn because there is transparency. In other words, there isn't ego, there isn't selfish motives. That's Kedusha. I'm going to read it in okay. ואין הקדוש ברוך הוא שורה אלא על דבר שבטל אצלו יתברך בין בפועל